Hi there. So in mid-July, Sarah Tuchel and I traveled to the Magic Circle in London to contribute to the British Society of Aesthetics and Science of Magic Association joint conference on the aesthetics of magic and illusion. And we thought you would like to see the presentation that we created using content from our interviews with you. So this is us running through that presentation so you can see how we used your faces and your words. All right. So, magic is famously hard to pin down, and we discovered this all over again at the Aesthetics Conference when every talk had a different conception of what constitutes magic. In their treatise on magic and meaning, Neale and Parr articulated this very quagmire, saying that magic is so big that a simple definition seems impossible, so vague as to be an empty vessel waiting to be filled with meaning. How are we to determine what we're talking about when we use the word magic? So while some authors have attempted to articulate a definition of magic, many of the most influential theorists of magic were not renowned for their performance abilities. We set out to understand the beliefs and philosophies of some of the world's top performers of magic, to find points of agreement and disagreement between them.
So Taylor Ludwig-Zach and myself, two psychology students at Carthage College with knowledge of conjuring, carried out a thematic analysis on semi-structured interviews with 6 different performers. So the interviewees included Joe Diamond, who's a mentalist and magician, Jamie Ian Swiss, an influential magician, author, and magic theorist, Carissa Hendricks, who's a renowned performer as the character Lucy Darling, the current reigning stage magician of the year at the Magic Castle and also a sideshow performer, Jeanette Andrews, a sensory illusionist, Tom Stone, a performer, magic coach, author, and theorist, and finally David Parr, a theatrical magician and author. So we started each interview with a simple question.
So, first one, we're going to start off kind of easy. What is magic?
Oh, easy? You consider that an easy question? I have an essay at the end of I think it's the concluding essay of my first book, Shattering Illusions. And one of the things I point out there is that there is no absolute definition of magic, and that it's up to the individual artist to decide what magic means.
So despite there being no single agreed-upon definition of magic, our participants were remarkably consistent in their definitions and articulations of the features that make magic. So here is David Parr.
To me, magic is simulated impossibility. It is a representation of things that cannot exist in the day-to-day world. And that's part of its purpose. Its purpose is to give us a brief respite from the rules and parameters of the day-to-day world.
So while noting the playfulness of the experience, he also focuses heavily on the illusion of impossibility in magic, and this was a feature that was shared by many of those interviewed. The illusions create an atmosphere of mystery, and inherent in these illusions, however, is a need for invisible deceptions and secret methods, hence the overlap of these nodes in our Venn diagram. One inconsistency that arose related to who dictates the experience of magic. Earlier, you heard from Jamie Ian Swiss, who noted that each performer gets to decide what constitutes magic. However, many of our performers also noted that the audience gets to decide what constitutes magic, and in some cases, performers even articulated both positions, which seemed to be mutually exclusive.
This inconsistency became readily apparent when we asked our performers what differentiates good magic and bad magic. Here's Joe Diamond.
My good friend Karen Henning, who did my tattoos, her definition of magic is magic allows people to be the hero of their own stories. And I have anecdotal evidence of this. Tony can back this up. We've all had someone go, "Oh, you're a magician? Oh my God, years ago, a magician put a red ball in my hand, and when I opened my hand, I had 2. What was his name? I have no idea. But they remember that. you very likely know that that's not the routine. The routine is one ball goes in the spectator's hand, a magician holds one, and the magician's ball vanishes from that hand and teleports into their hand. But the magician is completely edited out of that story. But I find it fascinating that with almost all of them, the magician, they don't even remember his name, and so the fact they completely have edited out of their memory the whole half of the trick that involved the magician. It's all about them and their journey. I had something, I opened my hand, it was different. They are the hero of that story.
So Joe articulates an idea about the essence of magic that many of our interviewees shared, that the experience of good magic is largely audience-centric. And while Joe provided an example where the performer's forgotten, David Parr highlighted the role of the performer in creating a framework for the experience of meaningful magic.
Whereas my feeling is, if I'm going to get up in front of a bunch of people and take up their time and attention for an hour, not to mention their money, I better have something to say. Well, what do I have? What can I say about things? Like, what can I talk about that's relevant, that's important? Well, I can have something to say about me and who I am. I can have something to say about us and who we are collectively as people. And I can have something to say about the world around us. Those are the things I can have something to say about. And so, you know, we don't go to the theater to bond with objects. Like we don't bond with the set and props. We bond with people. That's why we go to the theater, is to have an experience with people, to get to know people.
Implicit in much of what these performers were saying about magic was an assumption that it must also be deceptive. Tom Stone articulated an aesthetic for deceptive magic.
When there's several, when at least three deceptions are working in collusion with each other, it doesn't matter if you know what's happening, because your gut reaction will be a reaction of surprise. Bad magic is lacking the cat and mouse game. It's usually a single layer deception, and it's usually where the dramatic effect and what causes it happens at the same time even.
Jamie in Swiss offered a simpler, more direct articulation of the deceptive quality of good magic.
Best compliment you should be getting as a magician is, and this is the thing that people say about Tom Rees all the time, is, but he didn't do anything. You ask me, what's good magic? But he didn't do anything.
One notion articulated by many of our performers was that all of these definitions are context dependent. Here's Jeanette Andrews talking about how good magic can go bad.
I have watched people do incredible things that I could not care less about watching, because the person presenting it is just like, I'm just kind of bored by this. And then there's other people who I've watched do what most people deem as like rather basic or kind of mundane magic, but because of how they're framing it, because they're genuinely doing something new, something different, they themselves are interesting to watch, they're telling a story in an interesting way, whatever their sort of thing is that they're bringing to the table, even if they're maybe not doing something that is the most like mind-bending magic, you're like, that was actually very interesting to watch, and it actually made me, you know, kind of think about this in a different way. So I feel like usually the best magic that we see is a combination of both of those things.
This dependency on context emerged more strongly when we queried participants about the relationship of magic to a variety of allied arts. So we asked interviewees whether the following endeavors counted as magic: Mentalism escapes juggling or cardistry, sideshow demonstrations, gambling demonstrations, pickpocketing, and optical illusions. So the numbers denote how many of our interviewees categorized each endeavor as magic. Mentalism was universally agreed to be a form of magic. However, when we asked our participants whether Uri Geller is a magician, only half agreed that he was. Those who disagreed highlighted the different context in which Uri Geller practices.
So do you think that people like Uri Geller are magicians?
Ooh, that's complicated. So this falls into the realm of an artist getting to define who they are for themselves. So because Uri Geller does not self-identify as a magician, he's pretending that what he's doing is very real, I would never want to give him a role he has not accepted for himself. He's an artist doing things. However, all magicians can do all those things in the framework of magic. So I would say Uri Geller is whatever he wants to be.
Nearly all disagreements about the boundaries of magic were driven by context. In the right context, a demonstration of legitimate skill can forward a magic performance.
The way to put a clear line between juggling and magic, and it's tough with contact juggling and cardistry specifically because this crosses the line, is the skill you're displaying actually what's happening? So I'm going to balance a ball in my hand, and I'm communicating to you that I'm balancing a ball in my hand, and I am balancing a ball in my hand. That's not magic. However, when I hold the ball in a certain way, a contact juggling ball in a certain way, and rotate my hand around it so it looks like that is fixed in space, that is creating an illusion, because that is not what's actually happening. So that trick is magic. But the art form primarily focuses on a display of skill as it is happening.
The other blatant demonstrations of skill tended to be categorized as non-magic unless the audience experience hinged upon withheld information. For example, some folks thought that sideshow demonstrations, like the human blockhead, could fall into the magic category because audiences are partially naive to the physiology that allows them to happen. Each of these practices involves withheld information to a certain extent, and some can seamlessly merge displays of skill with magical deceptions, as in the metamorphosis illusion, which is part escape and part transposition.
So zooming out on this collection of interviews, we identified a set of emergent themes. Magic is difficult to define because it's non-linear. All performers can identify a set of factors that contribute to the creation of magic, but the way those factors interact is dictated by subtle changes in context. This dynamic is complicated by an ever-changing audience demographic. Both the performer and the audience serve roles in defining magic. Subtle differences in the weighting of these factors from one performer to the next can cascade into variations in each performer's approach to creating magic. An important next step in this process is exploring whether audiences are indeed sensitive to the same factors that these expert magicians articulated. All these interviews will eventually be publicly available on the Science of Magic Association website so that other researchers can contribute to mapping the boundaries of magic for both performers and audiences. So thanks to all of those who contributed to this labor-intensive project, and thanks to our willing participants. So you should know that we were given a 15-minute slot, and they told us very strictly 10 minutes of presentation, 5 minutes of questions. So that meant we had to be very selective in which videos made the cut. We could only select those videos that are short and pithy. And so we have plans to write up a more thorough analysis of these interviews for publication. So keep that in mind if you thought we were giving you short shrift in this brief presentation. Thanks again for your help in making this possible. Hope you enjoyed what we put together.